Welcome to the Founders Odyssey podcast, where we create an environment for founders to thrive through education, inspiration, and a supportive community. My name is Nathan Byrd, and I will be your host today. Some would call him innovative, others would call him Mr. Tenacious, and some would call him the brightest individual in the steel industry. Shep Hickey has over 25 years of experience growing, organizing, managing, and innovating in the steel industry. And if you look around, there is so much steel everywhere. Shep and his team have done a great job creating the world's first and only true marketplace for steel providers to buy and sell online. The industry is ripe for change and disruption, which is where Bryzos has come in, Shep Hickey and his team. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Shep. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. So one of the biggest questions I love to ask different entrepreneurs is, what is your definition of entrepreneurship?
That's a hard question. It's never been asked of me. I think it's just a simple thing, which is you're just hanging a shingle. You're trying to go do something on your own, at least in the beginning. You're saying, I have an idea and I'm going to go try and make it happen. To me, that's sort of the first step of entrepreneurship, right? Which is you've got to be like taking a step.
Yes.
There's something on the other side. And then over time, it changes as the cycles of the business change, meaning entrepreneurship, maybe the next cycle is you've got to get something out of your head, or next phase, you got to get something out of your head, or you've got to grow a team, or you've got to, sort of different phases. But I think ultimately your first step, first thought of entrepreneurship is just saying, I'm going to do it.
I agree. I mean, many people will say there's freedom involved, there's creativity involved, but your definition here is just getting it done and continuing to iterate. And that's what I think really a true entrepreneur is beginning, number one, and then just continuing to persevere no matter what comes at them, and that's where a true founder that can take a company from, 1 to 100 million, or IPO for that matter, they have a different DNA about them, right? So what was one of the inspirations in your life that you feel that created that DNA for you in the entrepreneurial journey?
I think in this instance, it's general. It's like for real DNA. I think it's just in my DNA where I can work at companies and be very good at that company and really be a team member. But I always am sort of pushing down the urge to go do something. But I know that my experience is that if you want to go do something, do it well, you have to first learn what you're doing. So there were years of sort of like just tamping that down and ignoring it. So I think in my case, it really is a matter of that's just how I'm wired. And back to one of your comments earlier, I spent a lot of time like drawing parallels between things. I think it's like a rumination of sorts of thought. And I think, what is an entrepreneur? I think a lot of people are entrepreneurs if they're in the right context. What I mean is you take so I'm in St. Louis, Missouri, and that's where Lewis and Clark started their journey, right? It's in St. Louis, Missouri. And it's like, who knows if they were truly the right people for that, to go all the way out to California, to the West Coast. But they started, and then they kept going. And they just found a way to be successful. And that's a lot how it is being an entrepreneur, which is you have an objective, like their objective is to go out to the West Coast. But from this, and they probably had some plans. When we get to, what we call Kansas City or whatever, here's where we're going to go right or left. But all this stuff comes up along the way. And entrepreneur isn't so much who you are, it's a mindset, right? Of like, okay, here's my objective. I think I kind of know the way, but I think where a lot of people might sort of, their effort might get thwarted is that it's not going to go the way you plan. And I think that can be the part that's hard for people. And I think the uncertainty of like, Lewis and Clark. I have no idea if we're really going to make it out there. We might be killed by a bear. There's so many pitfalls along the way. And so I think it's being an entrepreneur is more of like a mindset that I think it's very primal to a degree, which is like, if you're in the right mindset, this is a game of survival. And I think everybody has within them the will to survive. And so I think it's really more of a state of like mental being versus who you actually are.
Brings up the topic of challenges in life and the ability to overcome those challenges and really having an established why. My question to you would be, why do you build what you build?
For me, it's like not an option. I mean, things just grab you, right? It's for me. So I was thinking about this probably in 2011 is when I was really thinking about this and knew I didn't know enough. And there are other reasons that I didn't do it. But there's a point at which you think, out in the future, you're like, what if I woke up in 5 or 6 years and somebody else were doing this? How would I feel about that? And that's what grabs like me, for instance, is, I know that I have the conviction of the theory, right? And can I live with the fact that this is going to be done? And that I just didn't have sort of the courage to go do it, right? And I think being an entrepreneur to a degree, and this does depend on who you are, there's a risk tolerance, but I think for some, it's like the only option for self-actualization, I mean, just like happiness. Like you've got to go have tried and succeeded, or go on and tried and failed. Either way, it's people that'll resonate with people who think that way. They'll be like, wow, I would just rather go try and fail.
Share with our audience that precipice or the proverbial why in the road that you came to, and where if you would have taken one road, then you would have been comfortable or safe, but you decided, right? There was that moment of decision to where I will be courageous. I will jump into this full focus ahead and build what I have now conceptualized. Like, what was that like?
What was it like sort of stepping off and doing this?
Yeah.
Well, it was many things. I mean, there was sort of a sense of relief in that I know that I'm taking action, meaning I have this idea, how long am I going to sit around and think about this? So there was relief that I'd taken action. And that was quickly met by, just like I don't know if fear is the right word. It's just more like the overcome by a sense of urgency to get moving. I mean, I would paint the picture, which is, I resigned from my job and on great terms. And that was on a Friday. On next Monday, I'm in the basement of my house. And I think we had 2 little boys at this time. And I could hear them upstairs running around. And you're like, I got to get to work. You want to talk about like motivation, how much personal runway you have to get something done. And you can hear people upstairs running around, and just like, in that context, it's like, you don't sit and think about things, you start doing things. And so it was kind of like relief. And then you're just like, okay, you're a little bit terrified, but you have conviction in what you're doing, so you don't panic.
Consistent action over the course of time will equal the desires that you seek. And that's what I see is happening for you, is you've had this thought and it's been many years, but you now have taken action. And it's very interesting how now what you've said is you have gained relief, but yet the relief is coming with opposition. But you still attack it because it is in you, right? It is your DNA. It is what propels you forward. So it's interesting. So I'd like to, everybody out there who's listening, is to challenge you to look to see what you have in your mind and in your thoughts, and to know that on the other side of that fear is your great success and the relief that can come, but also knowing that there will be opposition. And that's where your accountability, and that's where the group that's so important for you to connect to will need to be there for you. So share with us a little bit about, who you're connecting with, who your mentors have been throughout this process, and some people that you've looked up to.
Well, I can't overstate the importance of mentors. Well before starting Bryzos, I had mentors, and mentors aren't always your friends, by the way. I mean, these are people who care enough about you to act like they don't care about you and get you to do things. So I think that before you take a first step into being an entrepreneur, I mean, like you're all in, you're not doing like still working your day job, but you're all in. You've got to build your village. You've got to have the people around you who you're going to have like two sectors, right? You've got a sectors that are just like eternal optimists. No matter how screwed you are, they're like, oh, sounds good to me. Yeah, forge ahead, keep going. And then you've got the other sector of the village, the population village. It's like, all right, this isn't looking so hot. Here's where you're failing. And they'll just hit you right between the eyes. And you need both of those things, in my opinion. I think it's a really unique person who can just do this truly alone. And I think someone who would say they've done it truly alone is maybe had, maybe a person or two help them along the way. Because we know from our lives, you think about through like growing up, you remember like these weird quotes or this one-time circumstance that you still think about that happened like 20 years ago. There's just like this one phrase that somebody says, and you're just like, for some reason, it took hold, like it has a foothold in your sort of paradigm of thinking. So even someone may say, I didn't have somebody or a village of people helping me or whatever, they've had something along the way, albeit small, that has given them sort of the mental foothold to persevere.
Talk to us a little bit about how you're receptive to objective feedback or critical feedback, for that matter, from people that you've had in your life. I think that's important for people to know out there, is how to truly position themselves, both individually and maybe corporately, to take feedback and make the proper iterations. How do you take that?
I think that you have got to be ready to be receptive to feedback. And it's like you go into entrepreneurship and it's at your own peril if you're not ready to listen. I mean, listening is, how do you, in all facets of success, if you're not listening, you're not going to get there. And whether you're talking about product market fit, right? How are you ever going to get there if you're not listening to what people say? What I'll say is this, is that when you start a business, you hopefully have a hypothesis and you know where you want to go. And you have some conviction in the theory, meaning like, take Bryzos, for instance. I have conviction in the theory that trade is going to be online. That's going to happen, right? What does that look like is the question. And that's where the listening comes in, right? Like, so you have to have conviction in your overarching theory, and you've got to roll a ball and play like a minimum viable product. But from that point forward, if you aren't reaching out proactively and saying, hey, what do you think of this? And if you're emotionally, if there's pride of authorship in what you're doing, you're gonna have a really tough time, right? And I also have this quote that I love, which is, and I'm about to garble it, which is, as long as it doesn't matter who gets the credit, there's no limit to what can be accomplished. And I sort of live by that. I mean, like, this isn't the Shep Hickey show. This is the success show. right? And I, as a founder, you come to the table with an idea, say, hey guys, here's what I think is going to happen. Here's supporting evidence that this is likely going to occur. Let's do that. And I think anything beyond that, if you have too much emotional sort of energy invested in the actual manifestation of this theory, it's going to be really hard.
Yeah, it's over analytical mindset, it can cloud what you're doing, and it can hold you back. And that's one thing we know as entrepreneurs is the speed of execution wins always. I mean, because you can make iterations once you get to a specific point, right? And that's, what you see in so many different industries. So, like I said, I've enjoyed the past year. So let's get to the present and what you're really excited about. I know, like, we've got this new company, and I know it's been around since fall 2018, I think, somewhere around there.
We launched in August of 2019.
Yeah, exactly. So, we were excited to hear a little bit more about that. And I swear, I've just been seeing every one of your ads on LinkedIn. Maybe you just target me only, but
I don't think we even target.
I'm just joking with you, but
Okay.
I'm just saying what I've seen is good. And let's take a little time to talk about this brainchild here and where you are currently, and then what you're excited about in the future.
Yeah, so I will say that when we launched in 2019, it was a minimum viable product, but we're a marketplace, but I think technically we're a market network, meaning it's comprehensive, it's end to end, meaning that it has a bunch of SaaS tools sort of loaded in there, and ends up with an interface between buyers and sellers. That wasn't the intent, by the way. I just wanted to have end to end, and then build it. You turn around, you're like, oh, there's a bunch of like SaaS in there. And so anyway, we launched, and really the last 2 years has been a very deliberate sort of cadence, right? Which is, like I talked about earlier, you're going to roll a ball and play, and you have to see how people react to things. And the other, like one of the cornerstones of what we're doing, and it's been that way since the jump, which is Bryzos is designed to support bricks and mortar. It's not designed to in any way replace it, right? We want to just create these digital tools because as the world goes digital, you have a lot of companies that when it comes down to the annual strategic meeting, I'm like, what are we going to spend our money on this year? It's a very small handful. They're saying, well, we got to get our e-commerce store going. No, they're talking about, okay, we need to get more saws so we can have greater capacity to service our customers. So the thought here is this is coming. How do we create this platform that's supportive of this change or this transformation? And so that's what we launched with. And the last 2 years has really been about just getting people used to this idea and being supportive versus being like attacking and fear mongering, right? Because I think that if we build the right environment and we are persistent in sort of educating on that, I think people are like, yeah, these guys aren't out to harm us, out here to help us.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited because that is taking place now. We have conversations where someone will call and say, hey, we want to learn about what you guys are doing. We'll talk to them about it. And they're like, this is not at all what I was expecting. I was expecting you throw a bunch of digital currency at me and, blockchain stuff and just scare me to death. And that's not, while that stuff exists and, we're always mindful of what's around the corner, but that's not what we're about. So I think what I'm excited about now is, in marketplaces, there's something called a control spectrum, right? Which is from a user standpoint, how much control does a user get, right? Can they choose what products they want? Can they negotiate it? So what we're doing now is we're pushing Bryzos as far into the members' hands as possible. Say, we don't want to interfere with your business. So one thing we're doing, and it's been on the roadmap since the beginning, but it now seems the right time to do it, is the releasing of stores. which is Bryzos is completely out of it. Like we're not even branded on it. And, instantly a company that's starting to feel the pressure of having a digital presence can just instantly have an e-commerce store where they can showcase products, accept, take RFQs from their user or from visitors, and all the bells and whistles like operational SaaS that we've created in the buy now, pay later. So all that just instantly they have it. So that's
so
really
good.
exciting.
You touched on this SaaS model here, and I want other founders to hear this, and maybe you got lost in there, but you talked about you had a vision for the product, and then all of a sudden a whole bunch of other stuff came out of it. And I think that right there is a huge attribute, really, just to entrepreneurship as a whole, but also as creativity as a whole, because you never know what's going to come out of a think tank or a development session, or what the customer wants, or ways that your product is going to be iterating, right? So, I mean, I just wanted to say something about that, where you've got these little templatized SaaS models that could be plugged in to other industries, right? And that's where you as a founder out there, you also need to look at ways that when you create your product, and this can't really be something that you foresee, or, you can foresee it in the future, but you can't quite predict it. But you will know that when you go through this process of opposition, you will design what people need, and you will have innovation. And that should excite a founder.
What is exciting, and it's, I'd like to take credit for it in some way, but I really can't, because all I was doing was I knew and I know how industrial transactions work, right? I've done ERP implementations, I've been the data miner, I've been standardizing part numbers, all this stuff, and third-party services, logistics, buying, selling. So I know before starting, that's really the importance of really knowing your stuff before you get started. It's like when you start a company, it's not the time to figure things out. It's like the time to take what you know and make it digital. But all I was simply trying to do at the onset is say, okay, here are these steps to get something bought and sold. Okay, well, I'm just going to create that in a digital format. And so like something simple like sales tax exemption certificates. Okay, so that's part of that. When a buyer comes to a seller and says, I need to get this quoted, they say, well, do you have an account with us? And they got to like break down and get all that stuff done. Part of that is they've got to give them a sales tax exemption certificate to see if they can be a tax-free purchase, right? So now that's like part of something we have to do. Now you add to that all the APIs available. We don't use very many, by the way, but all of them have one thing in common, like these tax sort of bolt-on things, is that when you get down to it, for sales tax exemption, they may like warehouse the document, but none of them will say this is a valid document. Like the risk part is not there. Like somebody has to say that this is valid or not valid. And so that's what we do, is we let sellers outsource that risk. We will make that determination. And then if we're wrong, we eat that. So it's like these little things along the way that you turn around afterwards. And we had an audit done by really the tech audit company. And they're like, do you know how many SaaS tools you have in here? I was like, I've got no idea. I said, all I was trying to do is get from here to here. And they're like, oh, well, you're an idiot. And you've got all these SaaS tools in here. And so that's what they were trying to sort of break these into pieces. Like, okay, there's an entire company built around that one thing right there.
Yeah. Well, and no, there's a lot to be said there. And that's why I want people to understand that as you go on this Odyssey as a founder, you'll innovate so many different things along the way, because you're simply trying to get from point A to point B. And you, as an entrepreneur who won't stop, you'll find ways. You'll innovate in order to jump across that proverbial ravine, to get to the end product that you have desired. So I think that's so important for everyone out there, is just keep going, innovate until you get to your end goal.
I think
So,
that's right. And you
yeah,
just can't listen to, I mean, so many no is going to be all around you. It's going to be all around you. And to an extent, there's an inflection point for sure. But the more no's you're getting, it's almost like the more right I feel.
yeah.
'Cause
Well,
I'm
let's talk a
this-
little bit about that. Let's talk about negativity, as an entrepreneur and deciphering whether, it's good, feedback, but it's also, and what I've gone through personally as well is, friends, family, various people in your life, they see things from a different perspective because they come from a different background, right? So speak on a little bit of what you've had to do personally to get to the position that you're at today, and then how do you guard your thoughts?
Yeah. So I guess how do you get to where we are today?
Mm.
The first thing is you have to be willing to work. It's that simple. Like if you want to win, you have to outwork. And I just don't know how else to put it. I saw a great, I'll digress for half a second because I know we don't have a ton of time, but there's I was watching Chris Rock and Tucker Carlson or something talk about this. And Tucker Carlson was talking about, I was on YouTube, I was watching actually Tucker Carlson, but talking about, Chris Rock, Kid Rock is what I meant, sorry. Kid Rock. So Tucker Carlson asked Kid Rock, how'd you do this? Like we've seen all these entertainers from your contemporaries sort of come and go or whatever. He goes, I outworked them. It's that simple. He's like, I'm not this crazy talented person. I get up at 3 a.m. and I write until the rest of the band shows up. He's like, I just outworked it. And I think that's entrepreneurship. I mean, you just simply have to outwork them. Mm-hmm. And be prepared for it. Like I remember a long time ago, an entrepreneur said the difference between an entrepreneur that wins and loses is similar to a professional practices, even when they don't feel like it. That's the thing. You got to do it when you don't feel like it. So I think that's number one. So you have to work. And as far as negativity, there's no room for it. Period. You can hear it, you can be around it, but you cannot let it seep in. I haven't had a genuine thought of, will this work or not work one time. I've had my conviction challenged, but the reality is, and that's the importance of knowing even before you take your first step, what is my thesis? Because when you are challenged, my just stripped down thesis is that industry will be online. You said, is that a yes or a no? The answer is yes, it's going to be. So if that's true, then as long as your underlying thesis is correct, you're good.
Yeah, that's good. Well, share with us a little bit about your company culture and how you've been able to build that, but also what you envision for it. And then, share with us a little bit about where it's going, where you see the future of what you're building.
Company culture is an interesting thing because there does come a point at which it starts to mean something, right? I mean, it was just you and maybe somebody else or co-founders or something. It's kind of like you probably know each other already. So it's not like you're sort of developing this culture. But when you start to bring on people that are really so important, you have to be more mindful of that. And I think that, our culture is really built around trust, is the culture, meaning that, you trust that everybody's going to be working together. You trust that nobody's going to be working against you. And it's just all about trust. And you have times that are harder than, easier. But if you know that trust exists, and I think it's about clear communication, which is, let's not spend time sort of, talking around something. Let's just get right down to what's happening and get done with it. And I think the other part of the culture is there are no freakouts, right? Like I don't panic, I don't freak out. And it's just, I think for me, it's just a level of steadiness. And it's a one brick at a time. Like that's how I think about things. And some bricks are heavier than others. Some take a little bit more time to get up. But I think it's about just being very measured in how you react to things.
Well, in your case, it would be a steel I-beam, correct? At a time?
It could be one steel I-beam. In the future, it might be bricks.
I'm
But
just
right
playing
now,
with you.
yeah.
No, that's good. Yes, trust and really keeping that level head. And I think that's important for any culture for that matter. So real quick, so share with us about the future, where you see, your company going and what you're excited about personally as well in your life.
Well, I think we're in a great position. Bryzos as a business. We've really been patient, and we move with urgency, but we've been patient in watching the reaction of the market and working with the market members to say, hey, what works for you? So I'm excited that we're integrating these conversations into our product, because ultimately at the end of the day, I don't have to use this. I'm not a user. I would have been in my, when I was in the industry, I've done all the buying and selling, but let's make this work for people who use it. So I'm excited because we're really getting honing in on that in a meaningful way and giving them the ownership that they should have, because these are their businesses, right? So it's got to really work well for them. And so I'm excited about that people are like, yes, this is awesome. This thing really works. And somebody said the other day, he said, you'd have to have half of a brain cell if you couldn't use this. And that's the best feedback I can get, because our team has spent so much time taking something that is inherently complex and making it super simple. And to get that feedback, you're like, wow, we have a long way to go, but that's not bad feedback today. So I'm excited about those types of results. And with the release of these stores and other things that we have on our roadmap, it's this is fantastic. And I'm also excited about the organic proliferation of products that are happening, meaning that you start in steel and then copper's happening and titanium's happening, aluminum's happening. And that's the way that backend was built. It's a user-driven, user-curated product catalog. So it can grow in any way. And that's why it's not called Steel Mart. It's called Bryzos, because I have no vision of it being just for steel in the end.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. You've got a broad vision for it for sure. Well, how can people find you personally, but also the business? Where do they go?
Yeah, just go to bryzos.com. That's BRYZOS.com. And it's totally free to sign up for it. And it's free to use. The only time it costs anybody anything is upon a seller being successfully funded. So we're 100% aligned. It's got to work for you before it can work for us, right? And
I think that's a good initiative that you've put in place for the company. Really align your visions with the consumer and partnering with them. Really, that's really ingenious. And I know that there's a lot to be said with that. So, as far as you personally, what are you excited about? Family? You're going to be traveling anywhere?
Well, I'm excited because my wife is currently having a stem cell transplant for multiple sclerosis, and it's not a life-threatening thing, but I'm excited because it's taken years to get here, and it has about a 90% efficacy rate in stopping the progression of the disease. So that's really exciting for me. And we have young kids, and she used to be a skier, a runner, and all these things, and our kids, will say things like, "Come on, Mom, you're so slow." They've got no idea that she could have whooped their asses, and they just don't think of her that way. So excited to have her get this done, and it's a bit disruptive in the near term, but long term is going to be fabulous. So that's something good. I'm really excited about.
Well, and look, and on this podcast we talk about a lot of stuff, and there's personal, and there's business, and there's a lot of tools and techniques and strategies that founders can use. But I think the biggest thing here is to have your alignment in life, and understanding where you have faith, if you're into that, you have family, and then you also have your business, which you can really focus in on. And there's really that balance, and relationships are and should be number one. And then of course there's the technical skill sets that you need to run business and to grow a company, because it's interesting. At the end of the day, I've talked to many founders, and it's you build a company to do what, right? you want to be successful so then you can give back, or you want to be successful because you want to invest or help communities. So there's always this element of family or community, or for most. And I think that is good to be said.
If you get out of balance as an entrepreneur, you're in real trouble. Because it's not sustainable. I mean, you've got to create markers in your life of burnout, meaning like, you're starting to burn out when, and you've got to have ways you can throttle back. For me, like, unless it's an extreme circumstance, I do not work on the weekends, period. I just won't do it. And, playing bands and do stuff that's, if you're so far out of balance, you see people who've won something, but they've got no one to share it with, and things like that. And one thing I do is I'll read a horror story one time a month about an entrepreneur. That's like something I do. And that can be like, okay, why do entrepreneurs get divorced? Like, go read one of those articles. Are you that person? Because entrepreneurialism, that word, is kind of like inherently a selfish activity, right? There are a lot of people around you that are like having to deal with that. And so be mindful, because, and the other thing I tell myself is, win or lose, Bryzos, nobody's going to die here. So don't find yourself in that sort of extinction vortex of thinking, which is that the stakes are so insanely high that, somebody's going to die. I mean, this is, I'm trying to digitize steel. I'm not trying to do something that is, destabilizing rudder on a helicopter. Like, that's not something I'm doing. And, so just keep yourself like in check by taking, pushing away and be like, okay, nobody's going to die. We're good. And that's how you sort of allow yourself to exhale.
Yeah. Well, perspective is everything. And, we're happy that you came on today. I just wanted to say, everybody out there, this has been Shep Hickey of Bryzos, and feel free to look them up. It's going to be a wonderful business. They're growing right now tremendously. And, you can be a part of that growth by sharing what they do to your friends or people that are within the industrial industry. This is going to be a very useful tool for many, many people. So if you've liked this episode, feel free to subscribe and like, and also share with your friends. We have a whole bunch of other episodes that we have created in the past, so feel free to check that out at thefoundersodyssey.com. And until next time, we'll see you again.